All right, hi everyone. My name is Jenny Gleason. I like to call this September 13th, 2022 Travel Council Advisory Board meeting to order. And then we're just kind of going right into it. Welcome. If there's any conflicts of interest, disclosures, ex parte communication. Anyone here on Zoom? Right. Hearing none, I'd like to go into citizens to be heard. And also hearing none here. And then next, introduction. So I'll start. My name is Jenny Gleason, Travel Council Advisory Board Chair. I also do sales for Redtail Air. Which is 2 minutes.
It's Rachel Bartlett, Grand County Economic Development, Administration and Special Event Coordinator.
Mary McGann, Grand County Commission.
Jason Taylor, Travel Council member.
Sharon Kinsley, Travel Council.
Alex Borshevsky, council member. Matthew Neeson, Moab Chamber, filling in for Lacey Shumway.
I guess you want to start next?
Robert's in his own world. Who are you, Robert?
Sorry, I'm Robert Riberia. I'm the assistant marketing director for the Travel Council.
August, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm August Granith, Grand County Economic Development Director. I'm calling from the Outdoor Recreation Summit up here in Camas, Utah, and I'm in the bar hanging out with this nice photo of a rusty car in a field. I'll pass it to Daniel.
I'm Daniel Leverage. I'm the general manager of the Hoodoo Hotel and a Travel Council board member.
Melissa, Assistant Director at Grand County Economic Development.
I think the best way for this, Melissa, is if you call on someone else online who hasn't introduced themselves yet, and we'll do the snake, the digital snake of introduction.
Yep. I think we have Mark.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Melissa. My name is Mark Stevenette with Love Communications, VP and Group Account Director. It's a pleasure being here with you all today. Thank you.
You didn't pass it, Mark. I'll go. So
I apologize. My colleague, Jonathan Smithgall. I apologize. I was thinking I should introduce some photos from behind me like August, but I'll just keep it rolling. Jonathan, go for it.
Jonathan Smithgall, I'm with Love Communications. I've been working in tourism for 10.5 years. With that, I will pass it to Kevin.
Way to go.
I'm Kevin Walker. I'm on the Grand County Commission, and I'll pass it to Sarah.
I'm Sarah Stock, also on the Grand County Commission. I'll pass it to Kaylin.
I'm Kaylin Jones on the Moab City Council liaison to the Travel Council, and I will pass. I'll pass it back. Daniel, you've gone. Then I'll just pass it back to the chambers.
We got Brian on the call, but Brian, if you want to say a quick hey, we'll be talking more to you later, but I think you're the only one online.
Hello all, sorry, we're in the midst of budget discussions here at the Redcliffe Lodge. Brian Hunnings, General Manager here at Redcliffe Lodge. Nice to see you all.
September 12th.
Thank you. And next up, August, or there's any presentations? I believe so. August.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. I don't have as comprehensive of a data update as we've had recently. That's in large part due to Ben, who's filling in as our data person at the moment, running 4 different grant processes all at the exact same time. He's in the STAR Grant Evaluation Committee right now. So I got some numbers from him, just kind of like high level, basically indicating that August is looking way better year over year in terms of occupancy. We've got those numbers from the STAR report. We don't have visa spend yet, so we don't know how that translates to distributional spend impacts locally. I'd venture to guess that has a lot to do with the movie ramping up in town, but that's just a guess. In terms of grants, we created the $250,000 flood relief grant program as Grand County, and we have already awarded $57,000 to 5 businesses. And by we, I mean the grant evaluation committee. They're meeting weekly at this point. Sorry, did someone have a comment?
Was that $57,000 has already been allocated?
I don't know if checks have gone out the door, but the committee has. Yeah, the evaluation committee has approved. Oh, do you say the checks have already gone out, Rachel?
They're starting today. They're going to be starting to pick up today.
Awesome. That's out of 24 applications that we've received, with several million dollars of damage assessments and a couple $100,000 of requests. So we already have requests exceeding the pot of the program. So that committee is going to have a lot of work cut out for them. Another update on that's maybe worthwhile is that my understanding is that we probably will not qualify for the federal funding that we were hoping for, specifically from the SBA and FEMA when it comes to individual property owner relief. So that's business or just residential. We had 14 homes hit the kind of catastrophic, or not homes, businesses, individuals, properties that had damage that qualified, that we needed to have a certain level of disastrousness, catastrophic damage. We needed 25 in order to qualify. So I'm not anticipating federal support at this point, at least for private. There might be public money available. So in terms of next steps, we have the grant program that we have right now. So just keep that in mind. Other routes are expanding that program, or really looking towards like state legislative advocacy to try to get a legislative appropriation to help fit that gap, because we're in that donut hole where we have big bad problem, but not big enough for the feds to help us out. So keep in mind that as we go forward with flood relief type conversations. Any questions on that briefly?
I do. Was that the one that was open into the 3rd or the 18th? The one that Ben just sent out last week? 18th, correct.
So applications are still open for that. And the committee is reviewing them on a weekly rolling basis at this point. Moab tourism grants, those were awarded at the last county commission meeting to 7 organizations and about 30 grand in total funding. That is less than the 55 grand allocated to that program. There were several learnings and outcomes from that process, including that when you have a really big program with lots of money next to a smaller program with less money, businesses tend to apply for the big program with more money. And that some of the applications were a little off the mark in terms of what our rubric was kind of looking for. And so some didn't get funded, even though that there was money available. But those that did get funded, the scoring committee felt good about. And there you can find details on those programs if you look at the agenda for the last county commission meeting. And then the STAR grant program is in process, as I mentioned before. That got delayed because of the flooding. However, anyway, Ben is going over that process right now with that grant evaluation committee, and there's conversation at the next commission meeting to potentially increase the pot of that program by about $500,000 plus or minus. So that hasn't been allocated yet, but that would be considered at the next county commission meeting alongside the budget amendment that would also increase the marketing spend that we're going to discuss here in a minute. The last piece that y'all know because you're involved is that the special event grant program has been fully allocated this year with the addition of the endurance ride and the powwow being funded. So that $55,000 in special event grant money total has been fully allocated this year. We still have the community event grant program, some funding for that through the end of this year that we're receiving applications for. I think that's the one on the 3rd that you're speaking to, Jenny, and Rachel, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But that's still in process.
No, we're accepting applications for the community grant for next year through the 18th.
Okay. And we're not planning to accept applications this year?
No.
Okay. So that's kind of my grant and data update for today. It's not as comprehensive or as visually beautiful as it has been in the past. But you know, we're doing a lot at the moment. Any questions on that before we kind of move along with the day?
Anyone? Good, thank you. August up next. Up next on the agenda is consideration and potential approval of applications for the vacant Tribal Council Advisory Board position expiring December 31st of 2024. And did everyone see the applications?
Yeah, I have questions, but it's like 2 pages of Howard's don't come through on the. There's 2.
That's his like older one, that one? Do you have
No,
that?
I don't know. This is what August sent.
I'm gonna drop.
And there was 2 that printed, and then on Brian Hunning's, it doesn't look complete. List your non-work experience. Oh, now I see it. He has it really tiny.
So I can just provide an overview of kind of what's before us today, and then we can dive into that if that works.
Okay. That's,
So Howard's application to the board is still valid. He still qualifies for all the same reasons he qualified before, and we've already have an interview, so we can consider him for this position. Brian submitted an application last week, and we can do an interview right now. That's why we have him here, so that he's online. If he's able to, Brian, I don't know if that's if you're able to do that within the context of your budget meetings at the moment. But if we go through that process and we take the time to ask Brian a couple questions, the same questions we asked Alex and Howard at our April meeting, there's the option for the board to consider nominating either Brian or Howard for that vacancy for approval at the next county commission meeting. Alternatively, we could continue to recruit for that position and leave it vacant for this month going forward. So I think that we should hold the interview with Brian while he's here today and continue with that process.
You have the questions up.
Yep, I have the questions up here. Yep, I'm happy to.
I do have one question really quick though for him.
Yep.
What county does he reside in? He didn't answer that question on that.
I'm in Grand County. I live here on property at Red Cliff.
Probably 2023.
August, do you mind starting the questions?
Yep, I can go right into it. Brian, thanks for joining us today. Obviously, you're in the middle of some budget stuff, so I appreciate the time.
We're on pause. Don't worry. It's all good.
Okay.
Can you put the
Sharon.
question up?
Yep, I can.
Thank you.
Can everybody see the questions here?
Yeah, now Brian's going to be able to cheat.
Well, he's already applied to
Never.
the Economic Development Advisory Board, and the questions are very similar. So this is a second go around for Brian. So Brian, first question. Again, these are the same questions we're asking all the applicants.
Yeah, sure.
If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what is your background?
Sure. So I've been in travel and tourism for the majority of my life, 30 plus years. I have been here a little over a year now in Grand County at Red Cliffs Lodge. Particularly, we just acquired, well, didn't just acquire it, but we started the process early last year in 2021 with Coleman Fryer, who was interested in retiring and getting out of the business, and which he hasn't been very successful at doing, by the way. I'll just get on that. And I came out here pretty much the end of August, actually a little bit, actually end of July, beginning part of August, and waited for the sale to finalize, which was in which was in the middle of December. And we've been here since. So we're in the midst of a multi-million-dollar renovation here at the lodge. We just finished a bunch of room renovations that we're currently doing, and then we're getting ready to start our real renovation and what we're planning on doing with the rooms and redoing the pool and adding a brand new movie museum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then getting programming set up. Prior to that, I spent 20 years in Hawaii. I was with Starwood before it was acquired by Marriott. I have a variety of positions with them. I started actually at the Phoenician Resort in Scottsdale, was kind of my first real hospitality job. And I was there for 6 years. At that time, I was on what was considered their luxury away team. And what we would do is we would just go around and convert, independent properties or properties that were not doing well according to their ownership groups and bringing them into the Marriott brand, or it's actually Sheraton brand at that point, and converting them to a luxury property. So spend time in Florida, spend time in Aspen, Big Island, going all over the place, converting properties. And then during that process is when Barry Sternlicht acquired and started Starwood, and he acquired the entire Sheraton, Westin, Caesar's Palace, became the largest real estate REIT overnight. And as part of that process, I was sent to Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas to help transition that property and make it competitive with Steve Wynn, who was just at that time opening Bellagio. So I spent 2 years in Vegas, and eventually I was there for a hot minute, and then Starwood sold Caesar's Palace, and I worked for MGM Grand for quite a while, and then ended up moving to Hawaii. And my first job in Hawaii was at the Grand Wailea Resort, and was on Maui for about 8 years, and then I moved to Oahu for about 10 years. And during that time, I went back to Starwood, and I became the regional vice president of food and beverage for Starwood Hawaii division, which meant I had 13 properties in Hawaii and 4 in French Polynesia, and basically lived out of a suitcase for a really, really long time. But it was great dealing with 9 different brands and everything from like a 4 Points in Sheraton to a St. Regis style hotel. So I have a wide breadth of experience there. Obviously, the Starwood board of directors eventually decided that there would be more money in selling Starwood to Marriott, which was basically looking at a way to reduce their costs when it came to, third-party bookings via Expedia and, Booking.com. And they thought if they acquired Starwood Preferred Guest, which at the time was one of the largest membership loyalty programs out there, that it would give them a rise above their competition. And it did. It was a bet that paid off. Everybody thought that they were kind of foolish for doing it and spending the money that they did. But now, they don't have to spend a ridiculous amount of money promoting their hotels, and it's more direct bookings than anything else due to that loyalty program. During that time, I took an opportunity to go to the North Shore of Oahu and go to Turtle Bay Resort. I was actually recruited to help sell that hotel, which had gone into bankruptcy. And they were looking for somebody who could transition the property into more of a four to five diamond property, and then market it and make it, it had a negative evaluation of, I want to say it was close to $1 million when I was brought in. And then we ended up selling it to the Blackstone Group for a little bit over $475 million at the time of the sale. At that time, they asked me to stay, but through the course of that, I had actually met the company that I work for currently, which is Western States Lodging and Management, which Daniel actually also works for, all transparency. And a couple of them had their children going to BYU on the North Shore, and they were in the process of building a brand new hotel in Kapolei on the southwest side of the island. And they said, "What are you going to do now that the hotel's sold?" And I said, "Honestly, I don't know. They want me to stay, but I'm looking for something new and exciting." And they said, "Well, have you ever helped design and open a hotel?" And I hadn't, because that's, in this industry, in the hotel industry, we often blame people like, who designed this place? They're crazy. This doesn't work. There's no flow here. And being able to go from soups to nuts and be through that process when it was just a dirt lot to actually opening that property was probably one of the hardest things I ever did. So I did that. And during the course of that, then obviously we opened the Residence Inn in Kapolei, and we won the Property of the Year via Marriott during that opening. And then COVID hit, 5 months into us being open. And we actually stayed open during the entire pandemic. In Hawaii, it was a little different than here. Hawaii was actually shut down for almost 15 months, meaning no one could even fly into the state without kind of a vigorous background check and COVID tests, etc. We were one of 7 hotels that remained open, only because we were an extended stay hotel. And we had too many people living in the hotel, and we just didn't feel that it was, our right to put these people out into the street where there was really nothing and nowhere for them to go. So we stayed open. We actually ran 95% through the pandemic, which is kind of crazy. And during the course of that, the owners of the Residence Inn, one of them at least, Kevin Garn, was talking to Colin at that point and was interested in acquiring Red Cliffs. And I guess Colin was not happy with any of the GMs that Kevin had presented to him. And Kevin called me out of the blue and said, "What do you think about Moab?" And I was like, I love it. I've been to Arches National Park about 10 years ago. And he's like, "Well, I want you to fly out here and look at this property. We're looking at this ranch and acquiring it, and tell me what you think." And I knew right then and there that he was trying to recruit me. But honestly, I was kind of sick of Hawaii and their restrictions at that point in COVID. And so I came here and met Colin. Colin liked me, I liked Colin, and the rest is history. And so I'm here now. During the course of that, I've also volunteered greatly with, I've sat on the Chamber of Commerce, North Shore of Hawaii, Chamber of Commerce in Maui. I've been on the board of directors for Make-A-Wish, both Maui as well as Oahu. I helped my brother start his own multimedia/digital marketing company during the pandemic, because everybody kind of got a side hustle during that time. And I, do like to give freely of my time and help to encourage and mentor youth. That's me. It's me and my 2 dogs. We've moved here, and I'm excited to be part of this property and the legacy that Colin built here, and looking forward to how I can contribute to Grand County.
Awesome. Thank you for the comprehensive answer. Okay. What is your next question? What is your understanding of the Travel Council?
It's an advisory council, and obviously is designed to do the heavy lifting for the county commissioners, give their input and suggestions and recommendations based on the issues that are facing the commissioners, and hopefully steer them in the right direction, or the directions that or provide them answers or resources that they might not normally be exposed to.
And what do you hope to bring to the Travel Council, and what are you hoping to gain from your potential involvement on the board?
I think there's a lot of similarities between Hawaii as well as Moab. There's definitely kind of tourism has kind of a black eye here in Moab. I think if you go in town and you talk to people, tourism is blamed for a lot of the problems that are kind of set up in Moab, which is not necessarily tourism's fault. But there is a lot of, how do we protect our natural resources? How do we promote economic diversity? How do we not put all of our eggs in one basket? And that's very similar to my experience in Hawaii, as well as being on the Hawaii Travel and Leisure Association board there. Those are big issues that you have to, finally balance. We did a lot of heavy lifting in Hawaii. Employee housing, employee shortages, getting through COVID. How do we make sure that we are doing the right thing and setting up programs that are going to educate and not deter tourism, but do it in a smart way, and have smart growth tourism? I think is really, how do you manage it so that it works for all parties involved? And that's what I hope to bring to the board.
Awesome. Thanks for your thoughtful response there. So next question, within the context of economic development in general and tourism in particular, kind of double-headed snake, what do you think are some of Moab / Grand County's best assets and attributes? And then what do you think are some of Moab/Grand County's biggest challenges or obstacles?
I mean, I've kind of talked about it, you know, it's just like real estate, location, 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 right? I mean, we've got 2 national parks and 3 state parks within an hour, hour and a half. People are coming, they're going to come regardless. I don't know that anyone thought it would be as popular as it would be here. And it's kind of ballooned, you know, I mean, you know, to the point where Arches had to pilot a reservation system for, you know, timed entries into the park, just to deal with the overwhelming amount of people that are coming in. You know, Moab, I think, is a unique destination that, you know, from agriculture originally to uranium mining to the movie industry to tourism and how that has cycled through. It's had a few different rises and falls per se. But how do we diversify that? How do we make sure that tourism isn't destroying what everybody's coming here for? And more importantly, how does it maintain the quality of life for people that are born and raised here? And that is really the issue. And, you know, we kind of face that same situation in Hawaii where, you know, 80% of the native population that was born and raised in Hawaii had to move to either Washington State or Las Vegas because they could not afford to live there anymore because it became so popular and home prices were being driven up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do we make sure that doesn't happen here?
Thanks so much, Brian. 2 more questions. What is your understanding of tourism taxes and how those monies are to be distributed and allocated?
TRT is a fun thing, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the goose that laid the golden egg. It becomes a catch-all. It's a great device if utilized correctly. It's also a great device to be able to provide community support where it's needed. I think the one area that often gets lost, that people lose sight of, is how do you do it so that it's not a knee-jerk reaction, it's actually a planned, targeted expense. You know, are you doing the work? And it appears that Grand County is doing that. Are you looking at what the best markets are to advertise in? Are you looking at who's going to have the highest spend per you know, stay? You know, there's a lot of different marketing. There's a lot of field research that can go into that. We're clearly a drive-to destination. We're not a fly-to destination at all. You know, it is a challenge here, and it is remote, and we only have each other. So, you know, TRT, I think, needs to help enhance the ability of the commissioners to be able to choose programs that are going to fit the needs of the majority of people that live and work in Grand County.
Awesome. And one more question. Are you prepared to serve as an officer of the advisory board if nominated? Is there anything in your schedule that would not permit you to attend board meetings the 2nd Tuesday of the month and any special meetings that may be called for a needed approval?
No, I'm good to go.
Awesome. Well, unless there's any clarifying questions from the board, I will thank you for our time, Brian, and you can get back to your board meeting and we'll get on with our board meeting.
Great meeting you all. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
All right, Brian, not on the call anymore. Any discussion about Brian? Is there any questions? Obviously, he's not on here. I'd like to entertain a motion to fill his position, either with Brian or Howard.
Has anyone spoken with Howard to see if he's still interested in it?
I have not spoken with Howard.
Coincidentally, I actually had a conversation with Howard on Saturday as he came by my house as I was out cleaning up from the flood still. He's definitely still as fiery as ever. I'm sure he would love to be on this again. I have not officially asked him if he would, but based on our conversation, he is very, very much interested in the TRT funds and how they're used and wants to have a voice on the table.
Have you talked to Howard in your office?
No.
No.
I didn't know that he was still even thinking about it till I got this email.
I do that.
So again, Chanel resigned effective at the end of August. She had a new job opportunity out of state. She really appreciated her time on the board. I shared that with everybody. So that position goes towards the end of 2024. We do, just for a note, for reference, there are 2 positions, I believe. I have to double check this, that expire at the end of the year. I believe they are, I'm going to pull it up just so I have the right information. Those positions are Jason and 3. Jason, Jenny, and Daniel's positions, for whatever reason, all expire at the end of this year. So those can be basically renewed through the same nomination process. But keep that in mind that there are going to be more. There's potentially opportunity for turnover. Daniel and Jenny and Jason haven't talked to you about your goals for the future. We don't have to talk about that today, but I just want to provide that context as to this process and whether or not the board chooses to nominate a new person today or would want to wait for whatever reason.
Hey, August, could I say something?
Yep.
You just mentioned that the terms of the travel council seem to be unevenly distributed around the cycle, and that's something I've noticed before. I think maybe when the county commission goes, to nominate, maybe we should throw in some 2-year terms or something just to try to get things
to even it out.
Even it out again. So I just wanted to throw that idea out there while we're talking about these things.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that's a smart idea.
We don't want every term expiring the same year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That's what he means, wants to stagger it.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are those 3 that all expire in 2022. So right now there's a term expiring in 2024, term expiring in 2025, 23, etc.
I mean, just up for discussion, I know, obviously, Daniel, how much do you work with Brian, or is it just the high level?
So Brian is employed by the same company as me, but we do not really react or work together in any capacity except at once a year meetings and occasional phone calls for advice like I would do anybody here in town. I don't feel there's any conflict of interest with him and I can vote honestly without any feelings one way or the other for him or towards any of the other candidates.
I do know that they're doing more music events out at Red Cliffs and Wednesday, Saturday. And I think it's exciting. I don't know if it's a subject to special events right now, but I think it'd be nice to kind of all be informed or just kind of have more of an insider.
The good thing about Brian is that he has experience in other markets, and I think that's pretty valuable, like what was being done in other places.
Yeah, certainly being from Hawaii, he's, that's like the most like tourist crowded, exploited place, and to come to Utah to bring some of that expertise, it sounds pretty good.
Right. Yeah. Hawaii is where Hawaii was
50
years ago. Yeah, I was gonna say 80 years ago.
Yeah, I think Brian would be great. The only issue I have, are we getting too overly heavy with hoteliers?
Well, so I'll speak to that. Chanel was a hotelier, so it's a hotelier for a hotelier. I do try to have some good representation between the folks that are gathering TRT and TRCCA. We do have to have by law a majority of TRT or TRCCA impacted. That's not the right word, but exacted, I should say, representatives. My understanding, I'm looking at the board, Daniel's the only hotelier at the moment, unless I'm missing something in terms of voting members. So to me, having 2 hoteliers voting out of a 7 member voting body feels comfortable to me personally. We have Jason who's impacted by TRCCA, as is Alex, and then the balance, you have Sharon and Lacey and Jenny who don't pay TRT or TRCCA. So if we went for another hotelier, that would feel comfortable to me. We'd have 2 TRT people, 2 TRCCA people, and we'd be compliant with statute.
Good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
I'm not a voting member, but I've called Brian a number of times just for help on different other issues, mostly nonprofits that I've been helping with activities, and he's always extremely quick to help and respond to any questions or requests. Easy to work with, in other words.
So I want to make sure that this discussion is comprehensive. I do want to make sure that we're moving forward. We have 2 pretty big things to work through on the agenda today. But make up any final comments if there are any. And yeah, Sharon?
I'll just make my final comment like I made when we were interviewing the others, is how we need to move forward. We don't need to go backwards.
Okay.
Somebody gonna make a motion?
I make a motion that we put forth Brian Hunning's name to the county commission to be on the travel council Moab area travel council board.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, have that going forward. So we will.
Rachel, do you have what you need for that vote? Did you get everybody who's in favor and any absences or anything?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, motion by Sharon, seconded by Alex, it was unanimous for all present.
Okay, great.
All right, on to the next item, discussion of marketing plans for the remainder of 2022 in anticipation of potential county commission approval of additional marketing funds at their September 20th, 2022 meeting. So
All right, I can kick this one off. So contextually, I think everybody's aware. We've already approved $300,000 for the Fly Market campaign that's supported by state co-op money. So that's 150 from TRT, 150 from the state grant. We were awarded another 225 from the state and plan to budget 225 from TRT for next spring to continue that campaign. That'll run from January through June, end of June. In many conversations at commission meetings and otherwise, Chris Barrett has kind of laid out what we've seen on the private side, which is a decrease in overall tourism activity and therefore a decrease in TRT through the months of May, June, July, even though August is starting to look like it's picking up. There are recessionary concerns, inflationary concerns, and overall a anticipated increase in marketing throughout the Intermountain West this fall. And we have a potential concern of hitting our reserve limit under statute. So kind of staff recommendation for county commission at this point that will be considered at the September 20th meeting is to pull an amount of money from reserves to drive towards a fall marketing campaign. And what has been proposed by Love between back and forth between our office and Love is a $500,000 drive market campaign, as well as a $50,000 Canadian focused international market campaign. We have the media plans that I will share now, and I'll just go back and forth between whatever plan we want to discuss. But that was discussed at the last county commission meeting, and there was appetite from members of the commission to kind of dive into that a little bit and make sure that kind of there was a collective consensus over what money went where for what reasons. Love is here prepared to present all of the above and maybe answer any questions that there are. And then we have commissioners Kevin Walker and Sarah Stock on the line today to help us kind of talk through some of those questions and concerns to get to a point that there's a proposal on the table at the September 20th commission meeting that the commission feels good about. So I will start that, and maybe the best thing to do is just have Love do a quick overview. For a note, I don't want to go into too much detail because we spent an hour just going over the media plans themselves, but maybe just a high level overview of which things, what is proposed and why they're being proposed, and then we can have a discussion on that. Additionally, if there's any questions over the state's campaign that Love is doing the media plan and buy for, Jonathan can speak to that as well. So I'll turn the time over to the Love team for a minute, and then we can do some questions and answers. And I think the advice would be high level overview first, and then we can dive into the details as needed.
I like it. I like it. That sounds perfect. And if you want, I could share my screen. That sound good? Okay. And for everyone there, I do have the state's flow chart pulled up of when they're planning to go live. Just high level, the state's going live a month and a half earlier than they ever have before because they've heard loud and clear that Southern Utah is seeing a drop off really since June. And so diving in real quick. We'll start by looking at the $500,000 campaign. This is a drive campaign, and I'm sure this looks super tiny. And so as August mentioned, I'm going to be pretty high level here on what the plan is. Love places more legacy broadcasts in the state than any other agency. And so we get really good value in our legacy buys here. You're going to be seeing about 11 million video impressions served across the state to help boost fall travel. We will be active with digital billboards. You're seeing some channels that we haven't done in 2 years, in over 2 years, historically, within the drive markets at least. The other things that I wanted to talk about, we will be live with paid social. Sojourn is a programmatic partner who has access to travel data. This is where we're going to be acting on competitive targeting. So if someone is looking at Grand Junction and there are quality audience traveler, we want to intercept them and convince them to stay in Moab instead. Same goes for TripAdvisor. Obviously, more people go to TripAdvisor to plan their trips than anywhere else. So we want to be there. But then I wanted to talk high level about Expedia. Now I know that hoteliers do take a hit when it's booked through Expedia, but there's something about this partnership that I think hits the brand that Grand County is really going after, and that is Expedia will donate 50 cents of every hotel room booked as a result of this campaign to a local nonprofit in Grand County. Right now, we're talking with Friends of Canyonlands, hoping to see that go through. But really excited. This is an evolution of how media buying is done, and we think it's a great next step. So that's the $500,000 campaign in a very high level fashion. I'll entertain any questions on this, Kevin?
Yeah, at the very beginning, you mentioned also state funded campaigns, but I didn't see. I'd be curious to know what they're planning on doing, and in particular, if they're already advertising drive-by markets, we could think of this locally funded ad campaigns as maybe being complementary to that. So in other words, we should take into account what other advertising is happening in making our plans. So.
Yep, Kevin, you're exactly right. And so what we're going to be able to do is leverage the state's buy. Love Communications places the state's tourism advertising, and we're going to be able to leverage and really capitalize on what is already going to be active. And so what I've pulled up for you here is a look at the media mix, and I'll put it in the slideshow so that you don't have to, so none of us have to squint too hard here. We're going to see one partner that is going to also be in this campaign. That's TripAdvisor. Our programmatic partner is going to be similar to Sojourn. And then we're going to be doing a lot of native advertising. And native advertising is upper funnel, really trying to drive inspiration. And then Moab would come in immediately after that and help to close the deal after we've seen people be inspired by this messaging. There's also connected TV in this campaign. That one doesn't start off until November. The reason being that we typically see a drop off in visitation in November. Usually October and September, we typically see pretty decent performance. It gets harder to sell the Southern Utah vacation experience once we get into the end of November, December. I did also hear, yeah, Kevin, sorry.
Yeah, so one thing that came up at the last county commission meeting is the mix of spending between fly-in markets and drive-in markets. And so I guess another aspect of what I was saying, and I should say, you know, I am certainly not an advertising professional. I'm new to all this, but if the state's already doing a bunch of advertising in the drive-in markets, should Grand County be putting, you know, more emphasis on the fly-in markets, you know, to kind of add some variety there? That's
a great question. So the state is putting more emphasis on the national markets, really focused on anyone looking for a national park, Southern Utah, or really looking at our competitors. If someone's looking at Sedona, Grand Junction, anyone looking for that winter kind of outdoor experience, the state's intercepting. And that's where Moab is able to come in and capitalize on anyone who's kind of raised their hand and said that they're interested. And so I don't think the current strategy, the drive market strategy that Moab has in place is in bad form, especially when you consider that travelers today are to be frank, they're traveling shorter distances than ever before due to the increase in gas prices and inflation. And so that's why we think the drive market strategy for Moab, and it does capitalize. We also have a fly campaign, August, that we aren't talking about right now. And so really it's about making sure that Moab is being strategic in both long tail markets when those start to recover, as well as the drive markets that can sustain us right now.
And Jonathan, it might be useful to look at the media plan for the currently approved fly market campaign. And then while you're pulling that up, a question I had was what's currently in the drive market media plan is exclusively Utah, Salt Lake, kind of Wasatch Front. And, you know, it makes sense, it's their number one market, but I'm not seeing any Denver, which is our number 2 market for drive-in. And I'm just curious what the rationale is for that.
So for the digital side of this plan, we were working off the idea that the request was to stay in state. This can 100% be opened up to include Denver. Denver's our number 1 booking market and makes, well, outside of Salt Lake, and makes a ton of sense. So we can definitely adapt the markets that are included here on the drive portion of this.
Jonathan, I have a question. Since we are talking about Denver, winter time, I mean Denver, the flight from Denver to Moab, they don't close that flight. So can we promote also in the flight campaign Denver?
Yep, we do. Yeah, if easier to see here, but very.
So we have Denver over there.
We do.
Do we need to duplicate? My question is, do we need to duplicate the flight campaign, target Denver in the drive campaign too?
Well, so if we were to extend this outside of Utah, we would include more than just Denver. Like what you're seeing in the fly campaign, and I hope that this is somewhat visible for everyone. But you see Los Angeles, Chicago, those 2 markets are not considered drive markets for us. In the drive campaign, we could 100% add Denver, Phoenix, you know, a couple additional destinations that are historically drive markets. And if you're looking at the Canadian campaign, one of the reasons we want to be in market in October is to capitalize on what we call the snowbirds heading from Canada to Arizona for their vacation. We want them to stay in Moab.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. I'm going to mostly reserve any technical questions for a later date. I want to make sure that this time is open for any concerns, mostly from commissioners or board members, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
I guess I can speak a little bit. This goes along with maybe what Kevin was getting at in asking. I remember at our commission meeting, I mean, it's a 10-to-1 spend ratio for our fly campaign compared to our drive campaign. And in strategy discussions about what kind of visitors we want to attract to Moab in general, we know that people who are driving from northern Utah, especially Tooele, Utah County, they're bringing UTVs and their RVs, and they're bringing all their stuff. They're even shopping in Salt Lake. And so we wanted to focus more as a community in advertising on people who are coming without all of that gear that is hard on public lands and are coming to buy hotels and buy dinners and spend more in our community. Thus, we wanted to focus more on fly campaigns versus drive campaigns to northern Utah. And I would definitely be in favor of expanding the drive market to include Denver. But I think I would also push for a change in that ratio of spending, because I know that people are driving perhaps shorter distances because of gas prices, but people are still driving and people are still flying. And like you said, that there might actually be an uptick in tourism happening right now. I don't think that we're at this place where we want to redo our entire plan about what kind of visitors we're trying to attract. So that's where I think if we're going to push through this giant budget amendment, I would like to see a different ratio of like fly market to drive market kind of campaign based on that idea that people who are driving from northern Utah specifically are usually coming with all their gear.
And Sarah, I can maybe speak a little bit to that first before Jonathan answers any technical pieces.
Sure.
So the 10-to-1 ratio is for international versus drive market. So the 50 grand is for Canada focused international digital, and the 500,000 is for drive, for that domestic drive. The spend for fly is 300,000. So it's much closer in intensity. And then we have another 450 going towards fly market next year. So total spend in the next year is 750 for fly, 500 for drive at the moment. Although I think that we should continue the drive and international at some level when we're talking about springtime. But just to, I think you're on the right track, which is we have this long-term priority, which is driving maximal economic input while minimizing negative environmental or other negative impact. But I think, the short-term kind of concern around a potential drop-off is why that drive is maybe like ratio-wise higher than otherwise a long-term vision, what we're trying to see change in terms of the priorities. And maybe Jonathan, you can answer anything else there that I missed.
Well, I just August, I wanted to follow up on, you emphasized the short-term drop-off, but I really don't think that's the statistic that we should be paying attention to. As we all know, 2021 was a very strange year. It's not really something to use as a benchmark. And I think if we look at longer-term trends, it's, to me, it seems like it's not time to panic. And I think, we should stick with our plan that's been in place a few years, which is to put a heavy emphasis on trying to get visitors who will stay longer and spend more. And so, like Sarah, I'm also concerned that we're just kind of doing the same thing we've always done in the past, maybe focusing a lot on the drive-in market. Of course, we're going to get a lot of people driving here, whether we advertise or not. But if we look at the direction we're trying to move, I think it's more towards some of these other visitors. So like Sarah said, we've had, I guess we've been converging to a new strategy for drawing visitors here that places a lot of emphasis on visitors which will provide more benefit. And I really don't see any reason to deviate from that at this time.
You're muted, August.
I muted myself instead of unmuting. I was just gonna say, I think those are points well taken. And I think for me, and maybe other folks in the room can speak to this. Well, I guess before I go there, like, what is it? Just a ratio shift around that would feel better? Like, what kind of? Because I think there is that short-term strategy that's kind of, I almost like, I think of it as taking out an insurance policy on the fall. I think a lot of local hoteliers, restaurateurs, outfitters, etc., had really down summers in terms of revenue, regardless of kind of longer short-term projections. and that, I kind of think of the fall drive stuff as like that insurance policy against that fall that I think folks are really concerned about needing that to come if they're in that local tourism industry. And, maybe other folks on the board can speak to that a little bit. But before we go there, is there like a easier kind of number ratio that you would be comfortable moving more towards? Or is it, we could also speak to some of the creative and the direction that we've been going with that in terms of really the call to action and where we're kind of driving people towards. And Jonathan, you look itching to make some comments, so I'm going to pass it to you first.
No, I think you've all made very great points, and we can 100% open this up to include more than just the state drive market. But what I want to emphasize with all of our tactics here is that we're focusing on quality travelers and not just the UTV Tooele driver who's taking more than they're giving back to the community. And Sarah, I 100% hear what you're saying. I'd like to go back and make a couple adjustments, just the markets that are outlined here. But I do want to, what's not clearly shown here is the emphasis on quality travelers and not back to the old days. I mean, when we launched the Mighty Five in 2013, we were serving that ad to everyone and anyone. And that was upper funnel awareness. And we've since adjusted our tactics to try and attract quality over quantity. And so, Kevin, I still think it's in line with the goals that Moab has in place, with a couple adjustments to the markets that are listed on this slide.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a point well taken that the effect of an ad campaign depends probably more on the content of the ads than the markets that they're being placed in. And just a quick question to August, is there going to be a chance in the future to review the content of these campaigns?
Yep.
Okay, but not this meeting, apparently.
Not this. It's not done yet. Basically,
Okay.
we at the last meeting approved the creative spend. So the Love team, the creative team at Love is working on that. We have a check-in meeting this week, but yeah, we will continue to ensure that any content is vetted and informed before anything gets placed.
Okay, well, great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, so I mean, I think August earlier you asking me if there's some specific target or something, and there's clearly a huge variety of different ways we could spend $1 million or whatever we're spending here, and I just think I'm not an expert on these things, but all we were presented with at the meeting was a big increase in the amount of money we're spending in local drive-in markets. And that, if that was the only fact we had to go on, and it didn't seem in keeping with our, quality over quantity direction we're trying to head. Now, maybe if we look at the content of those ads, we'll realize that actually it is. That's quite possible. So I think my main point is I think we should stay the course on continuing to try to draw in visitors who will spend more and not just focus on numbers. And then my second point is I think we're going to make comparisons and worry about trends. Comparing it to 1 year ago is not the way to go because last year was so strange. But that's the statistics that's easiest for us to put our hands on. And so I'm not prepared to say that, oh my goodness, we need an insurance policy until the fall until I see some more convincing statistics, looking at several years instead of just the last two. So.
Sarah, do you have? I'll pass it to I think the board members in just a second because I think that getting those statistics and maybe those stories from the business owners in the room, I think would be this is a really good time for that. Unless Sarah, do you have any other comments before we kind of move to that space?
I mean, I think just like Kevin said, I'm not an expert in advertising, and I think Jonathan has talked about altering some of the markets that were targeted, and maybe we alter a little bit the ratio on that spend and open up the fly campaign a little bit or something. I don't know what the perfect details are, but I appreciate y'all listening to that and also being responsive to it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Kevin and Sarah. So yeah, folks in the chamber who I can't actually see, I can only see Jason, but I'll let Jenny maybe moderate anybody in the physical space who wants to make any comments about those thoughts that I kind of put forward about, how the summer felt for outfitters, hoteliers, restaurateurs, and what concerns there are going into the fall and potential needs for kind of the whole discussion. Yeah, I'll pass it to the chambers.
Can I chime in here? I'd like to say that, as far as as our business goes, we threw out 2021. We just threw it out. We don't even look at it. We went back to 2019 and comparing numbers. And when we compare numbers to 2019, our business is down from 2019 numbers, which we thought was a pretty average, pretty good year. And one of the concerns with that is that the numbers are down slightly, but our operational costs are way higher than they were in 2019. A lot of us saw, just our business alone, we saw like a 20 to 30% increase in wages for our staff, across the board. So revenues kind of plummeted further, and I think it's hard to, when you look at like TRT is right off the top. The TRT tax comes off of the base price. It doesn't come off of the net price, if you will, of what we're doing. So I think things are down. Things are way down for us, and I think that I would love to see like a two-pronged approach. Where we're going after that fly market, but we need that drive market. And I think that there's this fear that anybody who drives to Moab is towing a UTV or is towing a dirt bike or the Earth Destructor 2000. And it's not true. There are those people who do come here to have fun with those things, and I think that we're trying to do what we can to educate those people to be responsible recreationists. But for our business alone, like fall is a big time, usually on weekends and stuff, where for rafting, a lot of families will come rafting. UEA weekend is normally huge. We're not seeing the advanced reservations that we've seen in the past of, families from Utah doing those trips. And that's a big deal, as it used to be. The families were, getting in that last weekend travel, such as UEA weekend, fall break, and a lot of these weekends we're losing that. And so I would like to see a drive market just to help kind of boost that fall market, while also at the same time we're shooting for those travel people. We're trying to go for the last people who are going, do I want to go to St. George or do I want to go to Moab? Let's try to get, those are the ones I think we're trying to shoot for with this fall campaign, in my opinion. If that makes sense.
I had a question about for the drive campaign marketing. What does that marketing look like exactly? I'm sure you probably have a few different things, but does it incorporate responsible recreation in those advertisements? So I think really targeting, if we are going to do the drive campaign, looking at, okay, well, this is an advertisement for someone who's going to say, oh yeah, I guess I would like to recreate responsibly in Moab. It's not just for anyone per se. So it's targeting folks who are more conscious.
For sure. And I think that that's kind of happening. And that's where, even as a travel council in this commission, you guys have said, we want responsible recreation on every ad. We want, that to be a part of the message that's going out, and it's people, the advertising message is, go river rafting, go on guided activities, especially because those bring in more revenue. They bring in that more tax, and stuff. And,
Can I interrupt really quickly on that?
Yeah.
Jeremy raised his hand and he's kind of in the weeds on what we have asked for that creative to look like. And to preface that, it's really trying to diversify the message that we're putting out there, focusing on like curiosity for the natural resources that we have, saying that we're also an arts and culture hub and we've got all these events that you can come check out. And trying to start the conversation that we've already begun about the strategic planning process and kind of what a rebranding looks like, and really kind of diving into who we are and what we're asking people to be when they're here. And that this creative is certainly the first step. Obviously it's going to be imperfect, but it's I think the next step in that journey. So Jeremy, can you speak to that a little bit?
I mean, August, you took the words right out of my mouth. I just wanted to remind you and other stakeholders on here, we were very intentional through the creative briefing process that we went through with some of you on this call to make sure that your input was heard. And many of the things that August said are just to echo is that we want to make sure that people are when they come to Moab, that they are a responsible traveler, that they are there to have fun, but not to consume, and we were also very careful with the assets that we were, photos and videos, that we are not going to put an emphasis at all on motorized, so all motorized stuff is off the table. Instead, we want to focus more on, as August said, on arts and culture, on events, on showing off the many other things that can be done in the community or outside the community with recreation. And so we don't have that yet to show. Obviously, that's later in this week, as August previously mentioned, but wanted to allay any concern that, we're portraying the community in a way that is not about, responsibility is paramount in this case. So,
Yeah. And I think that's
perfect,
Jeremy. And I think, I don't know who made a comment. I just want to say something really quick.
I was gonna, on the heels of that.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
We went through our initial review on creatives today, and just that it's all about the discovery, the wonderment of Moab, but also the responsibleness of being there and enjoying. So it really plays together really well with what everyone's saying here, and that respectful manner of treating Moab as such a great place like that. So just want to let you know that, just on the heels of what Jeremy said, certainly follow suit.
Awesome. And I'll pass it back to the chamber for any more comments, but I just wanted to add that I think that, this ongoing conversation of how we're trying to balance community and environmental impacts with positive economic impacts, I think is a really tricky one, especially when we're also ultimately just trying to be welcoming to all who are willing to be good visitors, right? And so, motorized and saying things like, the Tooele guy who drives an UTV, I think for my goal, and as we move forward through the strategic planning process, is really to make sure that everybody feels like they have an opportunity to be welcomed as a guest in our community. And I know that that's an ongoing hot topic. But just want to make clear that that's, the kind of welcoming element is something I'm really wanting to prioritize, and that we're going to make mistakes as we go, right? So we're trying our best to make sure that we're finding that middle thread, as it were, and bringing everybody together as stakeholders. Obviously, that's difficult and basically impossible, but I'm trying my best. So I'll send it back to the chambers. If there's any other comments, Matt, if you have kind of like a hospitality perspective, or I can't see any hands raised right now, but I'll let y'all self-moderate in there. Mary, go Mary.
It was raised over here, you couldn't see it. No, I think a lot of things happen, kind of the perfect storm as far as, like you said, gas prices, inflation has, prevented people from traveling as much. Plus the fact that we've had to raise, what you were saying, I see it even in the public sector with the solid waste district. We're struggling we have just as many, people using our facilities and using it, but we're struggling because of the cost of hiring people and keeping people. And so, yes, and so it is hard. So we need to really reach out, and I think we need to look at ways that we can help our businesses so that we can attract people that would rather, that would choose coming to Moab as opposed to going to St. George or someplace else. I really like seeing the advertisements that they're going to have advertisements at the Opera and the Symphony and Echoes, and those type of advertising. Even the Salt Lake Magazine tends to be read by, I think type of visitors that would be more respectful. I think that's a target in itself, and I think just making sure that all of our advertisements are geared towards the type of people recreation that we would like to see people participating when they do come to Moab. So I guess I'm saying I support the idea of moving forward with these campaigns, maybe with some tweaking with the amounts, and really focusing if there's any other places to besides the symphony and the opera and Echoes Theater, those types of clientele that we could reach, I think would be very helpful.
Thanks, Mary. And Sharon, you got your hand raised.
I'm just gonna be the bad person in the group. Number one,
There's no good or bad.
I do know that some people from Twilla that do not have a side-by-side, just FYI.
There's one.
I think what I've been thinking and then hearing is, number one, you don't, I mean, I know where the county sits and stands on UTVs, side-by-sides, all of that stuff. I think the people that own those, they're gonna come here whether we advertise to them or not. But wouldn't it be good to actually give out the advertising to them to recreate responsibly? At least they will be seeing do it right.
Yeah.
And not seeing it at all, because they're gonna come. And then also, sending it out to the WAS out front, there's a lot of people up there that don't have those, that if you don't advertise, they might go to St. George instead. But I mean, I think we would be better off giving some responsible recreation advertising for UTV use than just ignoring it.
Yeah, I second that. I was gonna say the same thing, like.
I think if you don't do it, you're ignoring it, and they're gonna come anyway.
You can't really just wait for them to get here and then try to tell them to educate them. We have to educate them before they get here. So that's.
No, I think those are great points, and I'll step in, and Mary, I'll go to you in just a second, and maybe I'll have the love people back my thoughts up on this, which is that there's multiple ways. Like ultimately, these are communication strategies, right? So Jeremy likes to say you've got your owned media, you've got your paid media, and then there's another one that I can't. Oh, earned media, right? I'm learning this stuff as we go, and so from my perspective, I think that the paid media really is that bigger funnel, right? That's like call to action, final step stuff. And I think that it's the icing on the cake. You're not going to get someone to be educated as to the best practices on the trail via a banner ad, a billboard, or whatever. So, what we're working as an office is to develop this whole Moab Steward program with the Trails Department that's going to have these really engaging educational videos. It's going to build off the new state program that you're required to get a permit if you're going to drive an OHV of any kind. And that for me, the funnel for the education is in your owned and earned more than your paid. And Jeremy, maybe you agree with this, maybe you don't, but I'll talk about this maybe later when we talk about budget for next year. I think for me, how do you get to that user group? You meet them where they're at. So I think for me is like content that's in whoever is the biggest influencers in those spaces, partnering with them to put together content that's really high level, communicating like authentically, like here are the problems we're facing, and we want you to understand that. And when you're visiting, like do be a respectful and responsible visitor. But the paid media is that super high funnel, and I don't think that point well taken, I guess is what I'm saying, Sharon, and I appreciate the point. And I think that for this conversation today, you're catching on bigger strategic priorities that I think that could be addressed with different tools, basically. But I think point well taken. A, B, Jeremy, I don't know if you want to say anything, and then I'll go to Mary.
I think you've got it covered, but you are right. I mean, we want to work in concert with all those spheres in mind, with paid, earned, and owned. But what we're talking about today is really about the paid piece relative to these media plans and the creative that will be placed out there on the messaging. But you're right, all of them do have to work in concert, and there you have it.
And then I'm going to go to Mary because you had your hand raised.
You touched on it a bit with that new law that the state legislators passed last year that to get the license, they have to go through this educational process. And if you've looked at the test, it's really focusing strongly on the behavior and what needs to be done. And so I think the educational piece is happening in venues like that, where, again, those short snippets or one-page ads, yes, you can mention recreate responsibly, but it's not a really place where there's an ability or the time or the means to do a great deal of education.
Yeah.
So for in like Salt Lake Magazine, for instance, what is it? Just one page ad? Informative.
Yes.
That's how I understand it.
Yeah, it would be a full page ad, correct.
So, I mean, I was thinking, if you're not targeting any motorized folks at all, I think we're just kind of losing that aspect of education. So maybe we do think about putting something in whatever motorized magazines there are out there in Salt Lake, in particular, or Denver area, or like the Western Slope. Those are the things that, like, maybe one page ad that's not. It's maybe not recreating responsibly, but more as to like what not to do. Like the specific content could be like, okay, you don't drive off the trail. Like these are the things like, you know, there's plenty of things that you can see in one picture that can tell 1,000 words where you don't do. So I think I guess that's the media. I would think the education that I would try to push for is actually targeting the motorized folks with, these are the things that you don't do when you're out driving, you know, driving over the curbs on streets and whatever else that I see in town. So I think there is something to be said there.
I would agree with that. You're welcome here.
Yeah.
But, you know, we need to address these things. I think,
yeah,
you know, and I think pigeonholing the motorized community into this one group of destruction is not right, because I think most of them are really good people, and a lot of them, 99% of them are good people. We just need to educate everybody. You know, it's the same thing with hiking. Don't bust across. You know, rafting. Don't pee on the shore. You know, but people still do it. You know, and stuff. So I think that this is a broader message of protecting the resource that needs to happen. You know, and it can encompass, you know, hey, you're welcome. You're welcome here. You know, just help us protect this area.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
I just want to add one comment. So here, me and us, we are here in Camas in the Utah Outdoor Summit, and today in the morning I attend one of the sessions about OHB, and it was, I mean, I was proud. They were talking about MOA, and the 5 first minutes they showed up the 5 tips about MOA, how to recreate and respect MOA. So that was amazing. They were talking about OHB and how we must to take care our land. And they were using our video from Mark Finley. And that was, I mean, I was proud about that. They were talking about that we are gonna use those, before you're gonna buy your permit, that you need to pass the test and all the things. And I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a great idea to maybe start talking about OHB, but in the way of responsible recreation.
I just want to say that.
Oh, Sarah, you got it.
I just want to say that I appreciate the nuance of the conversation. Like when I say I don't want to broadly advertise to Northern Utah because they generally bring their RVs, I'm thinking of the hoteliers and other people as well. And the commission has had these conversations, and I'm of the opinion that when we do that kind of advertising for the UTV user group specifically, it needs to be very, very targeted, usually with social media or something where we're capturing people who are already looking at coming here, like we have information about it. So we're not just like broadly advertising our beautiful OHV destination, but we're getting that responsible recreation messaging to the specific people who are going to come here. Because I agree, we need to get that message out. And the commission has even authorized a new trail ambassador program for off-road vehicles. So we're going to be piloting that program next year. So I'm saying that we're not trying to ignore the issue, just trying to decrease the broad spectrum kind of like advertising with the imagery of UTVs, because even if everyone recreates responsibly, there's still driving through all the neighborhoods. And that's what we hear about, is just the impact on our town. And so there's just like, yes, many, many sides to this. And I appreciate the nuance of this conversation. And I think that the commission also is not trying to just cut off communication to the OHV world, but rather hone in on it and target it a little bit better.
Awesome conversation across the board. I appreciate everybody willing to share kind of candid thoughts and the overall respectful nature of the conversation. With that being said, I would like us to move along and think really moving forward. I have to get an agenda summary to the Commission Administration's office tomorrow for the September 20th meeting. So if there is any meaningful changes to what's currently in the media plan, whether that be expanding the drive market plan to multiple markets rather than just Northern Utah, those things we need to tell Love to modify probably today in this meeting. So I think that to me, I'll maybe regurgitate what I'm hearing, and then Love folks can take note of that and maybe echo it back to make sure that we're on the same page. And then if we can get any more input from the board, that'd be really useful. So what I'm hearing is that for drive market, that we should consider diversifying the origin markets from just Northern Utah to kind of a more diversified mix of our top 4 or 5 drive markets, which sounds like Salt Lake, Denver, Phoenix. I don't know them. You do. Love team. I know them kind of. I'm working on becoming an expert in all of our data and having it at the tip of my finger constantly, but I'm not there yet. I'm also hearing potentially maybe bringing down the drive budget and bring up the fly budget. I think that where it's at right now is good. But I'd like to hear more, maybe Kevin, Sarah, if that's something you can, with this conversation, would still like to see, as y'all will be considering this at that commission meeting. Anything else? Kind of open the floor. Daniel, you have your hand raised. Comments there?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the bringing down the drive budget versus raising the flight budget part. I'm against that. Flights come in how many times a day? Twice. How many people on an airplane? 100. You're advertising a lot of money towards 200 people a day tops. Drive market is much more. 200 people won't fill up Moab, and it's not worth spending a ton of money on it if it's not going to bring a direct impact on the market, in my opinion. That's all.
I have a comment about that as well.
Go for it, Jenny.
So I think it was just Sarah. I think Sarah said this, just like maybe be a little more specific. I remember you saying August that drive is 500, fly is 750. So it's not a ratio of 10-1. I think that just those ratios were kind of a little off, and just a little bit more detailed description of those ratios and what those maybe literally are. I think that would help out, if not adjusting the numbers.
Okay, what they are at right now is 300K is currently approved, authorized, contracted. Love is gonna do it for fly market for this fall. The 450 to add on top of that is not budgeted yet, not approved, but anticipated. The state approved funding for that for next year, right? So for fly-in, let's just talk about 2022 numbers, 300K. For drive for fall 2022, we're talking 500K. For international Canada 2022, we're talking 50K. So in order of most to least, 500K is driving towards drive market. Flight is 300, international Canada is 50, without changing anything that is as proposed. Any questions on that?
I just wanted to respond to what Daniel said earlier. My understanding is that the fly-in, it's not just people flying to Canyonlands Field, it's people flying to Grand Junction or Salt Lake or Las Vegas and then rent a car and drive here. And so I don't, am I correct that when we're talking about the flying market, people have multiple ways of flying here, not just direct things?
We have been specifically targeting direct flights to Canyonlands and markets that are connected to that. So that is either Salt Lake, Denver, or markets that fly directly to Salt Lake and have a high length of stay, high spend in our area. So that is Los Angeles, that is San Francisco, that is Seattle, and then for Denver, that is Chicago. So the current fly marketing program does not include flying to Salt Lake and drive, fly into Grand Junction and drive. It's very specifically fly to Canyonlands.
But I imagine if you look at all the people, you know, from Chicago, say, who make it to Moab in the past year, I'm guessing most of them didn't drive direct all the way from Chicago. Most of them didn't fly to Canyonlands Field either. They probably flew to Grand Junction or Salt Lake or Las Vegas and did some tours. So I think in advertising in those markets, we're not limited. I 100% agree with Daniel that if we're only talking, you know, those planes are not big and there's not very many of them, and so that's not very significant if that was the only effect we were going to get.
So that's a good point. Go for it, Daniel.
My main point is just I am not opposed to that market and getting that word out. That's a type of guest that we want in the Moab market. But I don't want to cut more funds from driving to fund more flying. I think we need to see how this does first and leave it where it's at. And that's just where I'm going with it. Don't drop the drive market to add more to fly until we see how well this marketing campaign actually works.
Thanks, Daniel.
I would echo that. I think we need to do something sooner. A fly market right now, that's going to be months out for people to book, whereas a drive market can actually redeem a little bit of a fall season quicker.
Come for UEA, come for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and I should note that, you know, we're trying to launch this with a lot of alacrity. You know, we approved the creative so that the Love team can put that creative together so it's ready to go upon commission approval, or as ready as it could possibly be. So we're certainly keeping in mind, you know, moving on fall quickly in general. Yeah, Kevin.
So back to the question you asked a few minutes ago about, you know, you need to put together something to present at the next commission meeting. You know, is it possible just to include a few options or some, you know, fill in the blank ratios? I mean, I know as a commissioner, I certainly appreciate it when we actually get to decide between options rather than just being presented with a plan, you know, to rubber stamp.
So I mean, we maybe rather than speaking to like specifics in terms of numbers, what would those options ideally look like for you and Sarah and Mary?
I think you mentioned, you've covered it pretty well. I mean, there's the ratio of the spend. There's you know, the bigger drive in market versus, you know, just focused on northern Utah. And maybe you mentioned one other thing, but those are the things I'd like to see some options on, you know, when we discuss it at the commission meeting in the future.
Sarah and Mary, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's important that we choose to spend some money in some manner for the fall market. It's because even if it looks like we're right where we were on 2019, the revenue the businesses are taking in is less. It's just, and they're hurting consequently. And we need to take care of our local people.
Yeah. So ultimately, obviously, this conversation is going to play out in the commission. It's a political body that makes their own decisions. We just want to make sure that the options are on the table, the advocates are able to speak to what they'd like to see, and that the commission can make an informed decision. So I think what I'm seeing, and Love, maybe we can connect on this, but having an option where that drive market campaign has more markets to it, that seems like a no-brainer. I think we do that no matter what, probably. So unless Kevin, Sarah, Mary, you feel strong opposition to like diversifying those origin markets for the drive piece, I'd probably ask Love to do that no matter what. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Kevin. I'm thinking, okay, so let's do that no matter what, Love team. And then we can talk about, you know, basically just presenting a budget, moving around some options there. for your consideration at that meeting, if that seems like that addresses the question there and the desire for choices, Kevin and Sarah and Mary.
So I agree with what you just said, August. That sounds good. I wanted to go back to something Sharon said a long time ago in the meeting, pointing out the value of visitor education. And I agree with that. But to me, it feels like a very different thing from, trying to make sure, things aren't, way below expectations in the fall. So should that be some completely separate ad campaign that's discussed, or as opposed to sort of somehow trying to roll it into these other things? To me, it feels like it'd be better if that was done separately, but that it is a priority.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a starting next year strategic planning process, thought process is, some kind of a targeted media campaign if we are going to do paid. Given the timeline where we're at right now, I think really focusing on getting something across the table for this fall that everyone feels comfortable with saying yes to, I think is the priority, rather than, we'll have an opportunity to look at that creative. But I think, a targeted visitor education campaign towards all of the visitors we want to educate. We're working towards that. And I think it's a little out of scope, the targeted nature of that from what we're talking about kind of today, would be my thought. With that in mind, Love, do you feel like you would have what you need? I'll follow up with y'all, or our team will, today and tomorrow to make sure that you do. But just before we move on this conversation, do you feel like you have everything you need?
Yes.
Great. There's no action item for this. I'd maybe have it. If there's any final thoughts, I'd rather not. I would like to start on the last piece of the agenda, take the last 20 minutes to work on the prioritized list of expenditures for 2023. And I think a lot of the conversations we've been having will roll right into that. So, I'll have Jenny make that call herself. But yeah.
Yep. I think we're ready to go on to the next item. The drafting of the list of prioritized 2023 TRT and TRCCA expenditures for the final approval at the next meeting, which is October 11th, 2022. So August attached this, or this is in the Dropbox as well. If people got a chance to look at it. Just August. Obviously, most of us went through this last year. Was it November?
It was basically the exact same time. In September, we had a workshop. In October, we approved it.
Yeah, you just have the dates wrong. You have 2022 instead of 2021.
Those dates are right because I have changed it to reflect what is happening this year. So September 12th is this
that
meeting.
That would be September 13th then.
Good catch, Sharon. Thank you. I should always think twice before I contradict you. So maybe I'll just go.
October 11th is correct.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to go over what's in here, what I'm hoping to do today in our brief amount of time, kind of process basically. So this part doesn't really matter. Obviously, I think at this point we know that the role of this body is to provide a prioritized list of expenditures to the county commission as they deliberate on budget for TRT and TRCCA related expenditures. So this will be submitted to the county commission. There will be a public hearing or meeting, I'm not sure the details, in which the county will specifically, the commission will specifically review this document and will incorporate it or not into the budget process, right? So this is advisory. So what I have here, I do have updated collections numbers. So basically this is broken out into 4 four categories of TRT and then the TRCCA. So we have for TRT collections for 2023, what's projected is $8 million, $8,001,541. That is a projection that is below, I can't remember if it's below or exactly at like 0% change from last year. This is from Chris Baird's projections. So for mitigation expenditures, that is 63% of total TRT collections, projected at $5 million. Last year, we opted to make no recommendation for change and instead leave these funding priorities as they are already allocated. Again, that by and large funds law enforcement, search and rescue. It's the projects side, the impact mitigation side. Our office doesn't deal with it. The Travel Council Board has typically not been involved, but the board is well within their right to make some recommendations on how that money is spent, if necessary. I'll just go through this overall and we can dive into it in just a second. On establish and promote expenditures is projected at $2,960,570. That's simply 37% of that total projected collections. So that's the number that in statute we're allowed to spend on that type of category. Within that, there are three categories. We know this, but I'm just going through this. Economic diversification activity expenditures are projected at $986,856. That number is 1/3 of this 37%. So that's the max we can spend on economic diversification. There is the recreation, film production, and conventions expenditures, which is projected at $592,114. That number is 1/5 of the 37%. Again, that's the max we can spend on that per statute. And then there's the tourism expenditures projected at $1,381,599. That represents the amount of funds available from the 37% after the maximum allowable expenditure for economic diversification and recreation, film production, and convention has been allocated. So keep in mind, we always have to keep that above the 2019 base year, basically. It gets confusing in the reporting, but basically that is above that number. If collections ever dipped below that number, then that number would basically hit that ceiling and the other numbers would have to be modified down. And then there's TRCCA funds. I did get this number earlier, but I didn't have a chance to pull it in before this meeting. So I think what I'd like to do here is I have basically our 2023 priorities. I've just kind of spitballed a couple things on there for each category. I have our 2022 priorities that was in the last year's list for reference. I think what I'd like to do really quickly is we basically have 5 minutes more or less for each kind of section, or maybe, for mitigation, maybe the question is, do we want to dive into that this year as a body? Does anybody want to look at those numbers, put some prioritized expenditures? I'll open that up to board members for any thoughts.
I still say, like last year, they're spending it on the law enforcement and search and rescue. I think what they're spending on mitigation is good. What they're spending it.
Love it, Sharon. Any dissenting thought on that? Any contrary opinion to that? Okay, if we feel good about that, I'm going to leave that as is, and we can move on and spend our energies elsewhere. For economic diversification, the Economic Development Advisory Board is going to meet at the end of this month and basically make their own list to submit to the Travel Council Board to add to this section. They're focusing very much on that side of the pot of money. This body is well within their right to make a list and kind of modify that list, but I think that would help that process and kind of, I think the focus of this group is typically on the tourism and recreation piece. Does that feel good to everybody, or does anybody want to make any notes for now? We will review this at the October meeting as well. I'm seeing shaking heads.
I think we should wait I think we should wait till we get their list.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Recreation, film production, and conventions. I think this is a really good, I think we should definitely be, or this body should be involved in that. Last year, the priorities were Grand County's match funds for recreation hotspot transportation funding, funding the Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission, the Responsible Recreation Program, establishing recreation film and convention resources. This became the community grant program. And then understanding tourism and usage patterns. So just research that helps us understand visitation and recreation issues that aren't directly related to promotion.
So August, I was surprised I didn't see that one under A above rather than B. It's tourism related.
Oh, you mean like this? I mean, so this is last year for a note.
Okay.
But yeah, so this could very easily fall under the C is the tourism expenditure piece. Is that what you're referring to?
Oh, sorry, I got confused about ordering. Yeah,
I got it.
But I and maybe it's too specific for this short thing you're writing, but I do think things like the segmentation we did a year or two ago,
right,
and other studies of how tourists come here, what they like, what they don't like, I'd like to see more of that.
Okay, I'll make a note. No final things here, but I'll make a note of that. Any other thought there?
I have a question about last year's. Did whatever happened with the recreation hotspot transportation?
Commissioners, any knowledge of that? I'm pretty sure we spent that money as dedicated.
It moved ahead with bike path. I think there's part of it is going for what was in the paper about the types of parking downtown.
Oh, okay.
And so it's pretty much what was on the list.
Hey, August, I've got a comment from Lacey on the convention funding. I think this is the appropriate place to insert it. She was asking about the Grand Center. Doing updates to the Grand Center as far as it's technically lacking in the ability to support any sort of convention. It's some of the breakout rooms there, just being able to throw up a slideshow, not able to be done. And then also the acoustic properties. And I've seen that firsthand at a pipeline training. The acoustics are terrible in there.
Yes. And they're fixable. You've seen what they've done.
Like the hanging clouds.
Yeah, and also at Utah State University, that too, you saw how in the classrooms where they have to have like a cement or a tile floor, it's horrible for acoustics. They have
the hanging cloud that looks like a wood structure, but it's actually foam.
Yeah, so I think having money put into the Grand Center.
Yep. So Grand Center is funding out of TRCCA, which I brought down here. So I've added that as a note: support meeting tech and acoustics, the Grand Center, and I can expand on that. But that's where that would fit. Thanks, Matt.
They've got rabies.
I couldn't quite hear that joke, but that's all right.
Ben put a note about he thinks bats live in the ceiling.
Okay, so maybe mitigate the rabies infection risk at the Grand Center as well. I will tell Yordi if she's not already aware. So a couple of things I put into 2023 priorities. That community event grant program I think is a really good idea, and continuing that. Film is going to continue to be a part of where this money should go. And the Trail Ambassadors program, that's the responsible recreation piece. And then Moab Art Trails is something that this has funded year after year in the past, so I'm just throwing it in there as well. Sarah, you had your hand raised?
I was just noticing you changed responsible recreation programming to Trail Ambassadors, I assume. Is that how it carries over? But then it's also listed below. And I was just wondering how, like, more ad development or imagery, that kind of stuff, where is that happening?
So that would be down here kind of under 2023 priorities with the tourism expenditures, because that is, that's on our digital side. That is a part of our visitation oriented programming. So that's the Moab Steward program, Moab Ambassador program. I'll put responsible recreation here, but basically the way that we've been doing it is that everything that the Trails Department does on the ground in town comes out of this rec film and conventions line, and anything that is involved in reaching potential visitors out of market in their origin markets falls under our purview.
So I guess I'm confused. There's the Moab Trail Ambassador Program, but you have a Moab Ambassador Program, which is different.
That was brought up the other day as kind of part of this like move towards like a more welcoming kind of appearance. So like,
okay, so it's not the Trail Ambassador Program.
No, that's more about just
okay.
like if someone really wanted to kind of more like it's less about education and more about like, hey, welcome to Moab, like at the airport, if there was somebody who's just, I think the idea came from how Hawaii, they give lays to passengers, and it has this kind of notion of like, welcome to the community, that kind of notion. So less like trail and responsible recreation oriented and more of like, welcome to town. We're Moab, we're hospitable, all that kind of stuff. So just an idea, hasn't really been fleshed out in any real way. Anybody else would like to kind of throw on for now under this 2023 priority section to be hierarchicalized, which is not a real word, to be prioritized.
Is the film that you have listed under 2023, is that the same as the Monument Valley film? I mean, are we still going to be?
That's what that means. I mean, it could be anything, but that's what it's kind of capturing is the film support.
We still are funding the Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission.
Well, it's up to you to decide if that's what you would like to prioritize. But yeah, that's what that was referring to.
Okay.
August, on the responsible recreation, do we know like what they spent this year and stuff? Because I know like last year they had a big budget that they hadn't even gone through.
That's correct.
Gone through their budget?
I'm not going to speak on Maddie's behalf, but my understanding is that they have not spent everything that they were, because there was money pulled out of reserves on top of what could have been spent last year. And my understanding is they've been doing everything they possibly doing with the capacity that they have. So anything unspent is just means that there needs to be more capacity to do that work, whether that's hiring or whatever, is my understanding of it. But again, you'd have to ask Maddie, I think.
Kind of going back to what Sharon said, the film, is it going to just be more specific that it's specifically Moab to Monument Valley Film Commission?
That's what I would put in there. Yeah.
Okay.
But you could, like, if people thought that it would be really good to do like infrastructure or other kinds of like things related to film industry, or obviously we're having a big transition in terms of the intensity of film production activity in our community. If there are any other ideas that would go towards it, I would obviously want to have the film commission involved in those conversations. But that's where that stands at the moment. Happy to move on to tourism expenditures here, unless there's any other things that would like to be thrown in there. Okay, I'm gonna move on. So I'll start with what we wrote down in our 2022 priorities, and I'll throw some things, discuss kind of what I've put on to the priorities up here, and then get some input. So number one priority, thank you very much, was salaries and overhead for the Moab Area Travel Council. A continued marketing program, development of the local business marketing program, that's the Moab grant. Ben's heart reacting to that. Event funding, so that's the special event grant program. And then data dashboard for economic data and indicators. We are continuing to work to improve our data dashboard and insight ability and data resources, and are continuing to move that forward. Apologies for the noise. People are in the bar now. Under 2023 priorities, what I've put in here is strategic planning. So we're moving towards, I think, a more comprehensive strategic plan for both sides of our office, whether it's the kind of non-tourism economic diversification activities and the more tourism planning piece, but obviously there's a lot of overlap. So across the board, having a comprehensive strategic plan for all of the above that de-silos everything and allows our office to kind of be the implementing arm for that is my number one priority for next year. The second thing that's on here that I'm hearing is that kind of steady, consensus-based community and industry bought in kind of marketing. So, having a more steady drip that's constant, consistent, strategically oriented, 5-year plan style, rather than I think where we're at, which is reactive. We're in a reactive mode at the moment. And then going through a brand planning process. So, I think a lot of these conversations about who we are as a community, what we want to offer to our visitors, ultimately that needs to become a very concrete identity that has a visual language to it, that has a voice to it, etc. Right? So that's a part of that process. Updating a website comes after that. Updating the printed materials comes after that with the travel and outdoor recreation guides that we produce. With that new identity, or just modified identity, the Moab Steward campaign that we've been talking about, a video series that's really getting people bought into why it's important to be a responsible and responsible and respectful visitor to our community. That is proactive, it's positive, it's really saying we're prideful in our community. We want people to have a good time when you're here, but this is how you gotta behave when you're in town, basically. I spoke a little bit to that Moab Ambassador Program idea. Don't know if it has any legs, but worth discussing. This idea that keeps coming up year after year about kind of reporting and telling the TRT story better. Not only so that I think the community feels confident in how the money is being spent from a transparency standpoint and an understanding standpoint, but also for our tourism skeptic residents, and really driving, where are these resources going and how is this actually driving benefit to the community, whether that's through free concert series or what have you. And to that extent, I think speaking to this conversation about education and better storytelling, I think increasing our storytelling communications capacity through owned media, to me, I see that as a personnel thing. It could be contracted, but having a greater ability to put together really engaging content that touches on all these stories, that we kind of own a bit more, that isn't just so paid media focused. And then increasing the data and research capacity. So, in terms of who we have doing that in-house, again, Ben's kind of splitting his roles between doing 1 million program developments and management, and also he's kind of the data-minded person in the office who's tracking this information. So increasing our ability to understand the visitation and economic trends data that we see, whether it's contracted, whether it's more people in the office, being able to combine those two so that we can tell that story better, so that we can understand where we're at as we're making decisions and forecasts, having better insights into the future. Lastly, the special event grant, I think we want to continue, and then the Moab grant, I'd be curious to reflect on that process, and if we want to continue that next year, any changes that would be going into that. So that's a bunch of stuff. To me, I'd be curious if anybody wants to strike anything from this list or add anything to this list.
I have a question, August. So under the increased data and research capacity, I mean, we did talk about a couple meetings ago, adding people to your team. Just like how you're, adding about with Ben, since he's doing so much. And then also with the reporting capabilities and programs that is used, creating a new program. So it's easier to get accounting and.
Totally. So
does that fall under that, or can we?
So I think, are you speaking to, because there's software that we are in the process of trying to get onboarded with that would be more for our process. So that's it's called Zartico. It hasn't been approved yet. It'll go to the county commission as soon as possible. But that's like, it holds all of our STR data, our hotel occupancy data. It has all our short-term rental data in one place. It has all of the kind of economic indicators. It will have kind of geo-reference information about where people are coming from. But that's more for kind of destination decision making. If you're speaking to like, that should also have our tax reporting information on there as well. If you're speaking for like better insight into the budget at large, that probably is more of a county-wide focus and probably wouldn't be funded from this. But like in terms of having better like budget software and better transparency into the budget in a different way than it currently is, that would be, is that what you're kind of getting at, or is it?
Yeah, specifically for the TRT and TRCC, you know, just so we get something a little bit more detailed than the reports that we've been getting for the tax revenues.
So I think, you know, there's two halves of that. Half of that is our office and like any annual reporting that we put together or storytelling. And then there's like the actual nuts and bolts kind of budget and payables, and that's kind of like the clerk's office and the budget officer. And so that would be kind of like if the commission wanted to prioritize that. I don't know if that'd come out of our budget, but it's certainly a priority we can include in this letter in some way, if that makes sense.
Got it.
But yeah, I want to point out, like, I definitely have a priority for additional staff, but it's out of the purview of the travel council to specifically recommend like more staff, I think, technically. So it's if like I'm just putting it under capacity, because staffing decisions, you know, that's kind of out of scope for the travel council. Sarah, you had your hand raised, and then Ben had his hand raised.
I was wondering if like in-town signage, it's something that's been talked a lot about, like updating the billboards, which might be under some other category, but also maybe putting some more money, like tourism money, towards enhancing the tourist experience and directing people in town, and I don't know, like informational signs kind of things.
I can add that
Didn't
to
that
this
get
list.
put under the trail ambassadors?
You know,
they're doing some work in terms of the no, that's a really good question, because we've managed the billboards and everything on that for a very long time. Oh, there's Maddie.
Yes, Maddie.
Maddie, I don't know if you wanted to be included in this.
Trail ambassadors, and we're just keeping it in.
Yeah, because I thought the trail ambassadors were taking over the billboards.
So the question there is for kind of in-town messaging, whether in the newspaper or in the billboards or whatever, whether that should basically come out of this budget or this budget, and therefore be kind of managed by your office, Maddie, under the responsible recreation kind of purview, or our office under the kind of like visitor education purview.
Okay, you're talking specifically about billboards. I think it could come out of our budget. I think you guys have the connections to make that happen more efficiently versus my staff.
Yeah, actually, we are working on that right now. It's just we work with some local artisans. They can create a billboard for us, and then we're ready for approval for the commissioners. And
I mean, it seems to me if it qualifies to be funded under the tourism expenditures, which is like so much bigger, that it should be, even if it could be managed through the messaging that Maddie's putting together. I don't know if there's some hybrid option there, but I just wanted to make sure it was like flagged as a priority on there somewhere.
I'll just add a catch-all kind of line that's like in-town visitor education marketing. I don't know if that kind of captures the.
That's great. Thank you.
And I'm going to try to keep myself muted. Sorry. It is after 5 o'clock, but yeah, Ben, make your quick comment here.
I was just going to say, Jenny, I am working very hard with Chris Baird to create a place where you can find both visitation and visitation data and tax data related to visitation. We're pretty close, actually. That the website kind of exists already. It's just very ugly, but it's coming along. It's not going to be the permanent place, but it's kind of going to be like a stopgap until we come up with a better solution like Zardico and whatnot. So it's coming.
With that in mind, thank you, Ben. It's 5 after. This document will be live. It is view. I'm going to make it comment only so that if you have, if anybody on the board has any comments that they'd like to add or change, please do so in the coming weeks. We will have that final review and approval at that October 11th meeting, and that'll probably be all we do at that meeting. I will continue to review this. And if anybody wants to make any one-on-one meetings with me to express any questions that they might have or things that they'd like to put on that, please do. And that'll probably be me and Jenny. So let's make sure we do that. I don't have any further things to go over at this time.
Thanks for making that live for us. So I'm just gonna, if there's any other business or discussion, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, meeting now.
An hour.
Not even an hour.
55 minutes.
It looks fairly